quiet.
Oh, way to
4
get
minutes
quiet.
early.
I thought it was time or something.
Hello.
No, we are not.
What's that?
Our representative supposed to be here?
No, but David Olson is not with us at the meeting tonight. He is with family this evening. So he is an excused absence. We wanted that to be clear. And also I'd like to welcome Ashley and Kara tonight. Thank you. Our student reps typically don't come to study sessions, but I'm super glad they're here tonight because I think it's going to be a great discussion. So thanks for joining us. And as I look around the room and these fabulous gifts on the tables, thank you to our schools for recognizing our board as this extension of Board of Recognition month last month. So we feel extra special, so thank you very much. And then most importantly, I would like to just open the discussion up to Dr. Jarvis right now to give us other few thankful comments.
I asked for I guess a point of personal privilege, but really on behalf of an entire school district, to say thank you to the community and thank you to the voters. Our levy is secure, it is approved, it's at, according to the latest, it's at 61.89% and going up each day with the late coming votes. But on a 50% simple majority, it's really impressive, and it's an impressive statement by the community. And it's so important to the kids in the school system. I have said repeatedly to anybody who would listen, we never threaten the community. We never say what's going to happen if it doesn't pass. But when you see that weight lifted of knowing the next 3 years of funding are secure on what amounts to $1 out of every $6 in our budget, and the impact of a failure. Unfortunately, there are some school districts out there that are just either hanging by a thread or failing, and my heart goes out to them. But I want to say a special thank you to all of the staff, all of the community, all the people that worked so hard on this to make sure that this levy passed for the Peninsula School District. A deep, sincere thank you.
Okay, with that, I am going to ask for approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
No, I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. It has been moved by Chuck and seconded by Lori to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion has been approved. We will move on to new business, and I will ask Dr. Jarvis to say a few words about Resolution 2003.
And Mr. Green is also out of town, but I want to read his statement just so that these really are his words and all of us could share them. We are recommending award of a contract to construct ES9, the second new school to be constructed as a result of the successful bond election. The district received 4 bids on the afternoon of February 4th, 2020. The bids were closely clustered around the architect's final cost estimate. The award recommendation includes a recommendation for award of the base bid and alternates 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. We are recommending that alternates 1, 2, 3, and 9 be deferred until subsequent bids are received, but that the superintendent be authorized to execute a change order to include some or all of these alternates once staff makes a final recommendation. The project remains on budget, on schedule. We are excited to have a successful award for the construction of elementary school number 9. I think Mr. Brooks agrees with me. There's a big smile on his face. 1 year ago yesterday, on February 12th, we passed the bond issue, and this is now the second bid award, second school that we will know is under construction. The next 2 schools bids will be awarded in the next 2 months, and we'll have all 4 under construction as really a promise to the community that we would deliver, and we are on time, on budget, and delivering. It is thrilling to be able to recommend to the board that you pass Resolution 2003 for the award of construction contract for elementary school number 9. I would be happy to answer questions. I have Calvin Gassaway and Patrick Gillespie and others in the audience if we have questions that we can be of assistance, but I recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. With that, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2003 recommending award of construction contract for elementary school number 9?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion prior to the vote?
Just a statement, I'm relieved that we had 4 bids on that, and that they were all close together. That's a good indicator for what's to come with 2 other schools, that we have other contractors out there that are willing to jump in and available right now, so that's, yeah.
Good, yeah.
I've reviewed everything that I've seen, and it all looks really good. The numbers are right there, so.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. With that, it has been moved by Natalie and seconded by Lori to adopt Resolution 2003, recommending award of construction contract for elementary school number 9. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion has been approved. Excellent. We will then move on to Resolution 2004. There's more, and I will have Dr. Jarvis introduce that, please.
And I'm actually going to introduce both 2004 and 2005, but they will need separate action on each. But the 2 of those go with the deform process that you've now become almost intimately familiar with. That elementary school number 9, when it qualified for state assistance, and while we hadn't planned on that initially, we're delighted to be able to do all of the steps necessary. And 2 of those are an interesting statement, but because there's state assistance involved, they want to make sure that we file and have a constructability review report that in fact the building can be built, and that in essence the contract is worth giving because we can actually build the building. And secondly, that is our intent to build a building. While that may sound funny, it's part of the red tape at the state level. So I would be happy to answer more detail, and Mr. Gassaway can do that at length if you wish on the constructability review that was done. But I heartily recommend Resolution 2004 and 2005 to complete the steps required for the deform process.
Okay. Thank you. With that, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2004, accepting the constructability review report and implementation for elementary school number 9?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion prior to the vote?
Just a quick question. Could you just briefly explain why some schools would receive state assistance and why others would not?
At the beginning and in the initial planning stages, the 2 oldest schools, replacement of Artendale and Evergreen, were both old enough and of a condition they qualified for state assistance. At the same time, the 2 new schools and added square footage did not qualify, and that was, there's an, I'll call it archaic formula for how many square feet per pupil, and this district has been more generous than what the state actually allowed. So long story short, we didn't qualify on square footage. And then by December of 2019, i.e. not very long ago, the state caught up with our kindergarten enrollment for the last 2 years, and that gave us enough students to qualify for more square footage, because as they project the next 5 years, they're noticing that we're a very hardy growing district. And so that qualified us. We were still in position on number 9 to then back up and do the fastest deform process probably in the history of the state of Washington, and get to this point where before we opened the bids, we could complete all the deform steps, but it came as a result of Vicki could actually, I think, receive the notice in December or early January.
It was December.
Just before Christmas.
So we've been playing a good kind of catch-up ever since to make sure we covered all the bases. But that's why it wasn't there originally.
Right, okay.
And that was going to be my comment, just so that you could explain to us quickly, which you just touched on, the fastest D process known in the state, and like how long does it typically take to go through a D process, just on a regular basis?
Not to belabor it, but D1 is the first request to do a study and survey, to even think about a bond issue. and you work your way up to the process where we are now, that we recommend that, we have a bid that we can recommend that they review, and then the next piece of paper is go ahead and tell us it's built and it's done, approval. So that would typically take anywhere from, if a district hasn't even put a bond issue together yet, they've got months to years in the process to get to this point, and we've tried to do it in hours.
And when we say we, Vicki, thank you very much.
Yes,
And yes, I know it did, but I thank you for being here to take the call.
yeah.
That was, I think it was the 23rd of December, actually. And thank you for bringing in that state assistance that we did not think we were going to. Then, very nice addition to our
And thank
project.
you to all those kindergarten parents that helped us qualify.
Okay. All right, so it has been moved by Lori and seconded by Natalie to adopt Resolution 20-04, accepting the constructability review report and implementation of elementary school 9. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. And since Dr. Jarvis already prefaced 2005, unless there's anything more, I will move on to, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 20-05, certifying the intent of to construct elementary school number 9 for the purposes of which state funding is being provided?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It has been, is there any discussion prior to the vote? It has been moved by Chuck and seconded by Natalie to adopt Resolution 20-05, certifying the intent to construct elementary school number 9 for the purposes for which state funding is being provided. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. We now move on to 4.4, 2020, 2021, and 2022 school year calendars. Is there do you want to say a few words? Or a lot of words?
This may be a variation on the theme, but interestingly enough, the calendars are actually also related to the construction, and both the reason they're at this particular timing and what you will see in these calendars. I want to look at my partner out there as we work through the calendar of Carol Rivera and the Peninsula Education Association, because what we asked for was some extra time to work on the construction of 4 schools this summer, and we'll also have the emergent need projects. So we asked for a post-Labor Day start, which has not been typical of in the calendar, and yet not trying to run too late in the summer because we need both ends of the calendar squeezed. So that was an unusual request, and I worked with Carol, and she in turn with teaching, and really the certificated staff throughout the district, to come up with these calendars and be able to start after Labor Day, finish as early as possible in June, and then make some other decisions internal in the calendar. So I certainly heartily recommend the adoption of this calendar. It is unusual also in that you have a third calendar. You have the one for 22-23, and the reason for that, in a way, was to note to the community and the staff that after those 2 years, and we open the 4 schools and the 3 last schools in the fall of 21, that as the 22-23 school year commences, we're going to try to return somewhat to normal, whatever that normal may be at that point. So normally you would have 2 calendars in front of you. You have 3, and I would ask for approval of all 3.
Okay, thank you for the explanation and background. Is there a motion to approve the 2020, 2021, and 2022 school year calendars?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion prior to the vote?
Looks good, yeah,
Thank you for working together so well to get these calendars together.
yeah.
Slower than
Good point.
It looks pretty simple on paper.
Very good. Excellent. It has been moved by Natalie and seconded by Lori to approve the 2020, 2021, and 2022 school year calendars. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. Move to the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda prior to the vote? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Lori and seconded by Chuck to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda has been approved. Stephanie. We will now move on to Pioneer Elementary Planning. And Kira and Ashley, as we listen, when we open up for questions, please feel free to ask questions or make comments as well. So Stephanie Strader and team, is here to present the planning for the 2021 school year for Pioneer Elementary.
And
You want to introduce everybody, please?
yes, we will do that. I'm going to call Mr. Hellick, who is out of town, but he did want to chime in case he can contribute anything. Yes, please sit. You guys get to join me.
Your spaceship.
There's two here. I think there's one more. Here we go. Hi, John. We're getting started and you're on speaker. All right. Well, I will have, I'm super grateful. First off, I just would like to say it was an awesome Tuesday night. I was exhausted and I fell asleep with every intent of refreshing every couple of minutes, checking on that levy status. And when I woke up the next morning and found all the pictures, it was just a really cool moment for our community in terms of where we're at and looking at and getting ready to launch Pioneer. So I have my incredible core team here with me tonight. I would have to say that we would not be here able to share with you where we are in our journey without this amazing crew. And so they're going to take part in sharing part of our story and start part of our journey together, and I'll have them introduce themselves.
I'm Jennifer Wisner. I'm currently a second grade teacher at Discovery.
I'm Rachel Paxton, and I'm currently a specialist at Artendale.
Shane Sullivan, I'm a school counselor at Harbor Heights Elementary.
I'm Betsy Roberson, and I'm the resource teacher at Artendale Elementary.
And I'm Cheryl Nickelborg, and I teach 4th grade at Harbor Heights.
And they're now all pioneers. So I hope that you had an opportunity to take a look at the things that I provided for you. We will go through them tonight. I would encourage you to ask questions. Pause me if I am saying something that you need clarification. I have been living in this world 12 plus hours a day, 7 days a week. So sometimes I make assumptions that things are known when maybe they aren't. And so please feel free to speak up and ask questions so we can make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward. Tonight's topics that we would like to go over with you is last time I was here, I kind of gave a rough overview of our core principles and who we are. So we would like to start by stating what our mission is and our core principles, and my team's going to help with that. We had a very successful STEAM night a couple weeks ago. Some of you were able to make it, and we'd like to take a moment to recap that. We have some evidence of student work and learning. And then we're going to move into some technical issues about our opening model, what we're hoping enrollment and the lottery process will look like, as well as that staffing process and our incredible partnership again with Carol. Our proposals for transportation at this time, our community events, communication with Amy and team, and then our next steps in coming to speak with you. I have a clicker here. I have to remember. No? Is it on? No, it's not on. There we go. I can figure this out. Aha. There you go. All right. So, is this you two? Yep. It's kind of like
So we're going to kind of tag team this one. So the first time that we got together as a team back in December, and we met with Katie and Devin as well to help us. And we've spent a lot of time just talking about who we are, what's going to make us different from other schools in the district that will be additive to other schools in our district as well. So we talked a lot about what we value as educators, what kind of kids we're trying to raise up, and we have quite a lengthy document if you're interested, but it really helped us anchor everything that we plan to do, we hope will be anchored back in this, that can be kind of summarized in this mission statement, that we are mission-driven. So I'll read it to you. Our learning environments exist beyond the classroom walls in socially embedded communities that promote choice and self-advocacy. Through personalized, inquiry-based projects and authentic experiences, learners will collaborate with multi-aged peers to demonstrate the knowledge, skills, and mindsets needed to identify and solve our most pressing global issues. And we spent so much time really thinking about these words and what they mean. So if you have any questions about anything that you see in here, one of us will be happy to kind of explain what our thinking was on that. So as we moved from that, we thought, well, how is that going to be demonstrated through action? We came up with the 5 core principles that you see there. And then we also have a section called Principles in Action. If these are our principles, what actions will you see that are tied to those? So do you want to take the first one?
So just summarize these core principles. The first one being authentic learning, the one that we really feel strongly about, and really having our learners and that whole learning community, from us as teacher learners and the students as learners and parents as learners, just looking at using inquiry to design projects, develop solutions, really making it personalized so that the kids are very passionate about what they are learning about, and really connecting it to culturally relevant experiences. So how that might look, so we'd have multidisciplinary projects as a primary method of learning. We might have service learning, so they're actually learning in the field of which they're interested. So those are just a few kind of the ways that we would highlight our authentic learning.
And then the next one you'll see up there is learner agency. We feel really passionately about our students having a choice and voice in how they learn and then how they show what they've learned. And then also having really authentic ways to show it is really important. And so we want to have exhibitions where parents and the public can come in and students can present what they've learned once they've decided how they want to present it. They have choice in what topics they study and in the methods of learning that they use. Okay.
And the next core principle will be expanding our view of success and just looking at the child in a holistic way, and watching them perform to their highest potential. And then just using the assessment as a powerful and purposeful way to have them demonstrate multiple ways of learning. So we're assessing that constantly, and that might, in addition to the district standardized assessments, we would also be grading, focusing on mastery of essential standards. And we'd also be looking at measurements for social emotional skills and not just the academics.
The next one is collaboration. Learning is really a social process, so we want to design programs where students are able to talk with each other, and also collaborate outside the school walls with specialists and experts that are in our field or globally through technology, and also with bringing families as part of a collaborative part of our building.
Okay, and our last one was equity, and really looking at that is recognizing each individual for their unique gifts, really looking at them, again, as the whole child for their academic and their social-emotional well-being, and really doing that through meaningful relationships. And so, things that would look like we'd have relevant and contextualized learning assignments. We'd be designing at the margin to meet the needs of all of our diverse learners, and also giving access to learning in multiple formats so that all children can access grade level learning.
Any questions? I have one. I love these 5 principles. I'm glad that you added the line of explanation. I think the authentic learning, learner agency, even collaboration. I don't know if those words would necessarily speak to our parents and especially our kids. So I'm glad you added that. And I guess, how do you then, as the kids come in the school, how are these articulated to them? Because they're not going to understand those words, right? So do you articulate it to them, what they're going to experience and what they're going to be expected of them? Do you want to answer, or would you like me to?
I could take a stab at it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
I trust you.
Well, I think, just based on my experience in a classroom, is that telling the kids words don't mean anything anyway. And so we're just going to live it. And I think that's the power of us having 5, 6 of us designing this now, that we're really taking this all to heart. And then as we bring on more staff members, it's going to be really, I think, a part of how we think and plan. And the kids will just, they don't know any better anyway, because they're still so young. So,
And I
yeah.
think it's also within there that we're allowing the children to have a lot of choice and voice in what they're learning, a lot of self-reflection. And so they're constantly going to be reevaluating what they're learning, why they're learning, and what that greater purpose is.
Yeah. So it's a big part of your brochure. Are parents understanding it?
They are. They're asking great questions about it, and I think, like you stated, you can't just give them the words. It's going to be more meaningful when they see it in practice, which was the hope of our SEEM night. It was the hope to get them to come and be able to showcase what these mean. Granted, that was one night, and while we designed it, there wasn't control necessarily in terms of in a classroom where we would be able to kind of facilitate that learning differently and be able to say, these are the choices that you have and all of that. But, I think you mentioned a very good point, and I would echo what my team is saying here, that we're going to be modeling this, but I think like we do anything with like the social emotional standards that are coming on board right now, we can't talk with our children about being self-aware unless we are modeling what self-aware is and naming that. And so we will be naming this through our process, and it'll be evolutionary and, eliciting feedback from students. When, you've heard us talk about learner agency. When do you feel you have choice and voice? And if we're not seeing a representation throughout the day, well then we need to come back as a team and really evaluate why aren't the kids feeling like they have choice and voice at this time, and what do we need to do differently to adhere to that?
Excellent.
I do have a question I just thought of. I was at the open house, which I loved, and it gave me a great vision for, how kids might learn different concepts in the hands-on. And my question is about the choice piece, if it's possible. This question comes from someone who's not an educator, but what does that look like? If you can give me a simple example of how there might be a choice offered to students to learn a particular thing within that classroom, because that at the open house, people were going all around, and that was more, like you could choose to do this or this. But in the context of a classroom, can you just give me a example of how it might be determined what way a student learns best or what their choice is?
Does anybody want to chime in, or would you like me to? You go. Okay. I want to give them a choice.
It's not intended to be a stumper. I'm genuinely trying to get a vision.
I've gotten that question.
Perfect.
So the way I see it, so let's say we're doing a project-based learning activity on water, and as we're planning out this 6, 8, 10-week unit, we might have all of those same community partners come in that were at the same night. Granted, they wouldn't come all in at the same time on the same day. It would be strategically paced throughout that. When maybe those hands-on experiences with the community partners aren't there, there are other ways that kids need to engage in learning. And so it might be as simple as asking a question for the day. So it could be, how does our wastewater get clean for community use? And that could be a question that we're asking. And we know that the next day that the Gig Harbor wastewater is going to come in and present to our kids. So then we have students that are like, well, I learn best visually and auditorily. So here is a list of videos that have been approved by the teacher that are safe for you to view. And I like to read, but I'm not actually a solid reader, so maybe I'm listening to an audiobook. So just us as educators being aware that every student needs something a little different in terms of how they're going to lose, how they're going to learn, and applying that in a choice type menu where we're not saying you have to do it this way, but we as the educators, we've vetted the resources, we know, we worked with the team to develop what are those outcomes we want kids, and we're going to let you choose that. And it might be that I watched this video, but I didn't get very much out of it. So now I'm going to go talk to my partner that read the article or listened to the podcast, and we're going to talk about it because we have this guiding question that's facilitating that conversation for us.
Okay, thank you.
And do you want to add?
Sure,
Please.
yeah. And I think too, just thinking about my counseling role in my building, so we have like a second step curriculum. It's a social emotional curriculum that we go through, and at the end there's a unit it's very simple to understand but hard to put into practice. It's a problem solving strategy, and so one year I released it to the students saying, you know, how would you like to show me that you know this, where it was again easy for them to know it but really hard for them to put into practice. And I feel that ownership and that empowerment changed that whole that information, and so they could do a PowerPoint presentation or they could put on a skit, something like that, and it was a neat experience.
Okay.
So that's the choice of receiving the content, and then like you saw at the event, the choice of the output. When I was a kid, I read. That's how I learned best, and I expressed my feelings, and I still do best through written communication. Whereas other kids might be more communicative verbally, so that's where a podcast would come in handy, or that's where the video might come in handy, or maybe they're builders, maybe they're engineers, and they need to construct something to be able to articulate what they understand about a process. So we as educators, we can get to the same knowledge from kids, and it doesn't have to be all the same product in which they produce. And so that, again, would be another opportunity where they have the choice. And it's going to take a lot of time to build that capacity in our kids. I think we recognize that they're not used to that type of learning right now. And so it's going to take some capacity for us and challenging them to, you know, get to know themselves as learners and how do they learn best and what are they comfortable doing, and being okay with that comfort, but then stretching them sometimes too. If you're always doing this, have you considered trying this just to explore different realms?
I was going to, it may be a very simplistic way of looking at this, and also I may be exaggerating what you're saying, but so could I be a learner in kindergarten and I like to watch videos and hear it on audio? Could I potentially go through 5-6 years of school without reading?
No.
Okay.
No.
Again, I'm over exaggerating, but if that's always my choice, I'm glad to hear that you're stretching that, but if
We have a moral obligation to teach children how to read.
Okay.
So I've been very clear going out to schools and community, like we will teach our children to read. It is my goal that every student that comes through our school by the age of 3rd grade will be readers. Because they are invested, they are curious, they are empowered, and they know that reading is important.
Okay.
However, with that being said, technology is quite amazing. I want them to know there are different avenues to get information to.
Like I said, I know exactly.
But good clarification. Yes.
I have one question too, because you mentioned assessment, so obviously we're still going to be subject to standardized tests and things like that. So if we are focusing on this choice and voice, which I love, then how do we translate that to success in something that they have to do in a really traditional form, like those assessments?
Yes, I've been talking to a lot of people about that too. We are a public school. We're subject to the same policies, the same procedures, the same assessments. We will be doing the Smarter Balanced. We will be following the state or the district assessments in terms of DIBELS and iReady and all of that. However, we just know that, and our schools do, all of our schools know that children are defined by more than just that moment. And so our belief is that when we are getting kids really empowered and engaged in learning, they're going to go tackle this task that before might have seemed tedious or daunting, or I don't know how to do this, I don't have the grit, determination to do this. But because I've been persevering for 150 days, I can tackle this. I got this. This is fine. I've applied the reading strategies to things that are important to me, and I can do this. We won't completely disregard that assessment or any of assessments, but you know, we do have a philosophical belief that by empowering our kids and getting them to really see those authentic experiences, they're going to look at a task like that and say, I got this.
Thank you. I think that lays a good foundation for the rest of the discussion. So.
All right. So moving on, we have a little overview for you of our STEAM night, and Katie, I'll need you to click on that link there, please. The blue one where it says STEAM night website, please. Thank you. This is you, Jen.
And Shay too.
And Shay. Oh, the microphone might not work.
There we go. So we
Is it not working?
Uh-oh.
Just click that, yeah.
we designed our STEAM night to be kind of like a day in the life of a Pioneer student. And so we had a whole bunch of our community people come in. We had some stations designed in order to enhance learning, and all of it served the purpose of answering our big question. Like we would have in our classroom, we might have an essential question on how do we keep our watersheds clean, our waterways clean. And so through all this exploration and discovery and learning books and making observations of the world around them, they should be able to answer that question. And then comes a point where we need to assess, and we were trying to show parents and the community members who were there that we can assess in multiple ways.
Yeah, and I think the community partnerships I thought was a really neat, when we, talk about one of our core principles is collaboration, being able to draw on that knowledge in the community. I think that was a moment that I feel like kind of brought us together and kind of connecting that, our vision piece to kind of grounding it.
There was one community partner who said to me after, we've always wanted to come into the schools, but nobody has yet asked. And not only did we have fun tonight, but we had 3 other schools ask us if we'd be willing to come out. So, I mean, it was just really cool to see everyone coming together for kids.
Yeah, and at the end of it, we were able to show parents in our brochure that we had a rubric that we could score kids on what they've learned, even just from a 1 or 2 hour event, that they could answer the question and that they didn't all have to answer it in the same way. So these were some of the products that the kids were able to create. Some of them were podcasts. We had videos with our green screen. We also had rain gardens that they were able to make and take. They had art representations where they could take landscapes and improve them to make them more water friendly. And so I'd love to be able to show you just 2 of these products, one of them being Grace. This was Grace's
So
podcast.
the third podcast down, if you would click on that one, please.
Over on the
Next
other
over to the
side.
left.
There we go.
Other one.
Well, we can watch the video first. These are sisters from Artendale.
My name is Ava.
Hi, my name is Olivia.
Getting to the first question, why are we even here?
Well, we're here because we have 2 questions to answer. Why are waterways important?
We need to work to survive and drink, or we will, world will die. Then how do we keep our waterways healthy?
Well, we start off by not putting plastic into the water and not having oil spills.
Oh, that would be an impact on the animals.
Would you? Yes, please.
My name is Ava.
Hi, my name is Olivia.
Getting to the first question, why are we even here?
Well, we're here because we have 2 questions to answer. Why are waterways important?
We need to work to survive and drink, or we will, world will die. Then how do we keep our waterways healthy?
Well, we start off by not putting plastic into the water and not having oil spills.
Oh, that would be an impact on the animals.
And then on the other side of it was Grace. If you, yeah.
Kids would figure it out. Ashley, you're on your
My name is Grace and I'm here with Emma. Today we are going to talk about why water is important and how to keep our waterways clean. Now, our first question is, why is
Water important? So, Emma noted that water is important because we
to survive. That is a very good statement. I believe that. That's amazing because we do need water to survive. Okay, next. Our next question is, how do we keep our waterways healthy? Now, one way to keep our waterways healthy is to keep... Sorry guys, we had a little technical issue. To keep away gas leaks off boats. How we can fix that is to go to our local boat dealership and we can make sure that they keep the oil leaks to a minimum. Thank you for listening to our Pioneer STEAM Night podcast. This is Grace signing out.
So I just loved in this process that the kids had to do research downstairs, collect their facts that they would like to use to create this product, which they wrote out a script ahead of time, so they're doing writing, and then they were able to record. And the product that they created had so much voice, you know, it really, they had ownership in the process and were excited about what they were doing.
They did that night?
Mm-hmm. And
You were
they
there
never
when the
podcasted
hundreds of
before.
people were walking around?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so I was in the video room, and like you said, to see the kids, we had 2 stations. One was a green screen, and we had a program called Flipgrid, and it's kind of like a YouTube where they have a cam. But they were so excited to get on and you know, I think share their story. Kind of how I think it touches on that desire to be known, and I think. Seeing them get excited about that was really cool, as well as, I mean, critical thinking and the grit with the sometimes the technology that they had to work through to get there. So.
And I think sometimes we think of these things and we're like, well, what actual learning is taking place? There's so much learning in the knowledge soaking in part, but then as both Jen and Shay are articulating, there's so much commitment to, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, so that when I do my written script of what I'm going to say, there's attention to those details of the writing skills that we want them to get out. But then we get to, it feels different when they're on video or they're speaking to us. It's their authentic, it's their actual literal voice speaking to us about what they learned. And that's pretty cool. So our hope is we have a live, active website now, which is really cool. So we're going to link this to our website with our promo video that we have from STEAM Night, along with you know, the unit plan that we developed putting STEAM Night together to just kind of be one piece of information to showcase anybody who's curious and learning about who we are and what we're hoping to accomplish.
Can you send us the link of the promo that was created?
It's not created yet or finished
When
quite
it's
yet.
created?
Yes, absolutely. It'll be blasted, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, so Katie, if you would go over to the tab to the left at the top, the yellow one. Perfect. Yep. Awesome. So we're going to move into some technicalities now of just who we are at Pioneer and our opening model. We are opening in fall of 2020, folks. I counted yesterday. That's 32 weeks. I go, it's 32 weeks, and I'm like, it's still 32 weeks. So there's this dichotomy in me that's, you know, excited. We are opening kindergarten through 4th grade. We'll have 19 classrooms, somewhere between 450 students. We are going to be welcoming the district's track program, which stands for, and I've been in the district for a long time, but I just recently learned that actually stands for something, which means teaching responsibility, academics, and communication. And these happen to be our kiddos in our school systems that might have disabilities in behavior, and they have unique programs designed to meet their needs. And then we will have specialist roles. Our specialist positions are determined based on enrollment, and so how many right now is unclear, but we will have specialists, and their roles will be determined, but we are emphasizing, of course, PE and music. PE is a state-mandated specialist. Music is very important for our kids, and so if we get that 3rd specialist, it would be in line with those roles, movement and music or arts connection. So we're really bringing in those pieces for our kids. When we then extend beyond to fall of 2021, 3 of my colleagues will be opening brand new schools as well. We will expand to 5th grade. At that time, the whole project will be complete, the addition and the remodel of the current facility, and we will expand to somewhere between 5 and 550 kids with 30 classrooms. 30 classrooms in one building. Harbor Heights has 30 classrooms and portables. It's pretty cool to think about.
Stephanie, I wanted to interject
Yes.
something that David wanted to share tonight.
Yes.
And won't go verbatim what he sent to me, but he would really, really like to see music at Pioneer, mandatory music, with instruments, and that they are potentially a band. So I guess I just leave that with you as something that I believe other board members are very interested in growing that at Pioneer, as well as across the district, as our board looks at long-range planning, bringing music more into our district. So I as a statement to the board, that's something I think we've all expressed, and then specifically, Stephanie, to you, and ensure glad that there's a music specialist up front, but he would be encouraged to get instruments and get you guys really going, and that would be a full board discussion if we would go that direction, but I wanted to share that with you. On behalf of David.
I appreciate that, and I know that, you know, the specialist roles are evolving. It is standard district practice to have music. There are music standards that need to be taught. We are looking at equity. We have to stand out because we're a STEAM magnet
Yes.
school, but musics are important to all of our kids, and so I think if that is something that we're going to do, we need to really consider what does that mean for all 10 of our elementary schools. But to me, nothing's off the table. I think conversations, and we're really trying to be intentional about how does it fit within the curriculum. So when we're thinking about music, I had an amazing conversation with a music teacher in our district the other day about the science behind music, and how cool would that be to bring in how do instruments work, what's the physics behind it, and then a design challenge for kids. Now you know the principles of music, you know how different types of instruments work. Now you're going to go design your own instrument. Other schools I've seen have piano labs, and students get to learn how to do piano, which is like the catalyst for other types of musical instruments. So I think there's definitely some things that we work in, and I'm hoping to create this team of people who are willing to explore different avenues. I don't know if Dr. Jarvis, you want to add anything?
On to David's comment. He definitely felt that having that music piece very strong in the school would be a good attraction to parents of why they would want to send their kids to Pioneer. So that's David's comments. Anybody else on the board want to interject anything?
Yeah, I would comment too. I also think that would be a really exciting piece for Pioneer to include. And possibly down the line, all of the schools, you know, and what that looks like, I'm not sure. I don't know if it could potentially be done in partnership with a community music program that's already in existence or what. But I do think one piece that would be just fun to look at is if it were mandatory, or you know, if everyone were doing it, like the kids who play the recorder now in schools. My kids loved it. If everyone's doing it, it just gives it a whole different feel, I think, because not everyone will be as excited about learning an instrument, but I think the possibilities are endless when you require that of kids, or I hate to use the word mandatory and require, but you know, if you just introduce it as something everyone is gonna do.
Exposure.
Yes, that,
Call it universal exposure instead
exactly.
of mandatory.
So yes, I just would say it's not just David that thinks this. I think the possibilities are really exciting, and Pioneer would just be an ideal place just because it would be unique and perhaps it would be a draw for families.
No, I just agree. I think we've kind of heard a lot of discussion about what makes STEAM different than STEM, and I think something like this would really set you apart. So it's an exciting opportunity.
You just have to balance that with the rest of STEM.
It's cool.
Yeah. Chuck, any comments?
Is that something you've already thought about in music?
We're just starting those conversations in terms of instructional design, and I mean, David has expressed those before, and I was a music kid. I played the clarinet for 5 years, and I think there is extreme value in music, but I think arts is also broader than just music too, and so I also believe we can do everything, but we can only do certain things well. And so I think there's a balance between what are we going to tackle now, what are we going to prioritize now. We have to launch our school program, we need to do it well. We can't do everything well. to start. And so really being intentional about what is that plan, how do we build that in, and then what does that look like as a big picture piece?
Yeah, my thought would be that this is not a themed school, that we would have other schools that would have themed curriculum. And so I wouldn't want to put the onus on Stephanie, you gotta do music. I want us to think big about the other schools also. And if music is gonna fit somewhere else better, we should look at that. Just, that's my thoughts.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping you have music. It just
We are having
the
music
extent-
most
yeah.
definitely,
Yeah,
and
I think the exposure's there for all elementary
Yeah.
kids,
Yes.
so it's not.
Yeah, it's in essence, if they don't, I mean, in elementary, we have the opportunity to expose music to all kids.
Yes.
Because once they go into middle and high school, they may never be in another
Yes.
music class. So
Right.
it's their only opportunity.
Yep.
And I think the whole science behind music is huge
Yeah.
and aids
That'd be
into
good.
other
That's
subjects
really
as
cool.
well, so. Okay, so we'll move on unless Ashley or Carrie, you have any comments? No? Okay. Excellent.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So we're going to move on to the enrollment and the lottery process. We know that Pioneer is opening as a STEAM magnet school, and with it being a magnet school, there is no boundaried area. We are open to all of PSD students, and because of that, we're hoping to draw in students. I think it's important for us to articulate the goals of the enrollment and potentially the lottery process. That really solidifies kind of the conversations we've had around some of the decisions that we are presenting to you this evening. So of course, my first goal is to build a community. I am really missing that community of staff and students and families coming together. On the flip side of that, it also will alleviate some of the overcrowding in our schools, and that is why we have Pioneer to begin with. The other step of the enrollment lottery process we're going to be diving into is really trying to create a fair and equitable process. We want Pioneer to represent the demographics of our district, and we want it to be fair and equitable for all students. And then the third part, a lot of feedback I've received through my conversations with the community is siblings, keeping siblings together. I think siblings in a school community is essential to creating a strong school environment. I am doing Pioneer, and my kids are at another school this year, and it's hard. It's hard being a working parent, having kids at different schools. And so while we can't promise and we can't guarantee, we are hopeful that we've designed a lottery process that would take into account siblings and try to keep families together. So if you're keeping in mind those goals, this is what we have for you today. Just a reminder that a lottery would only be required if there are more families interested than space available. So if we are opening somewhere between 400 and 450 students and 380 express interest, it's likely we may not have to do a lottery. However, if of those 380, 220 of them are kindergartners, we're going to need to reflect a little bit on how to move forward. So you'll notice while I'm presenting ideas to you tonight, there are a lot of what-ifs. There are a lot of scenarios that we need to talk through. This is a first for Peninsula. I've talked with people who have done lotteries. Everybody kind of has a slightly different take. I think it's really important for us to do something that is what Peninsula needs and what Peninsula prioritizes, and that's what we're going back to those goals for. Okay. So, it's going to start with an interest survey process. We're being intentional about not calling it an application because I think an application infers that you can be denied. You fill out something wrong in your application, you're denied. If a student or a family doesn't get in, it's not because of their application, it's just luck of the draw. We're also not calling it an enrollment at this time because filling out this survey does not imply that you are necessarily being enrolled. So we're calling it an interest survey, so families who are interested, a lot of things keep me up at night. We're calling it an interest survey so families can express interest in Pioneer. I think it's good for them too because it's non-committal. It doesn't mean that I'm definitely coming. It means this is something we're exploring for our family. These are the kids that we're interested in potentially sending to Pioneer, and then it allows that kind of process to evolve. So hopefully with success tonight we can launch that tomorrow. And getting all the information out to families, and that survey would be open for about a month. We are hoping to close the survey on March 18th with a firm 4 p.m. Deadline. So that the purpose of the deadline is I have tentatively scheduled the live lottery draw for April 1st. Closing on March 18th would allow us a week and a half to vet the data, make sure that it's accurate, make sure that we have, a parent didn't click, they're currently a third grader and they're transitioning into a third grade. We want to make sure that data is vetted, that the families that are saying they're interested are coming from Gig Harbor. It would allow us to see, do we have 300 kindergarten families coming? And if so, I'm betting I'm going to have to revise a little bit to some of these processes. And so that was important to us to make sure we have that time. Once that March 18th comes, we vetted the data, we would send an email to families confirming that we received their survey and assign them a family lottery number. And then we would have the lottery draw on April 1st. So that was a lot. I'll just pause there for a moment. This is just a sample of what the lottery interest form would look like. I believe I sent you a link to this as well. Any questions so far?
Stephanie, if
Yes.
I enroll,
Yes.
if I fill out an interest survey,
Yes.
I won't know that it was submitted until after the 18th.
I believe we have it set up so that once you submit, you get an email back saying it was
Okay.
received, but you wouldn't get confirmation from the district about your family number and all of that
Perfect.
until
Okay.
after the 18th.
Yep.
And I think you slipped a little bit. You do want to make sure that all these kids come from the peninsulas,
Yes.
not just
Yes.
Gig Harbor.
Yes.
Yes.
I consider it all of us are Gig Harbor, but yes, that is absolutely true. I am a peninsula kid, so yes, absolutely. And we'll have paper copies of the enrollment form, and I also have 2 office hours that I'll post for families that need help, assistance coming in to fill that out if they're English language speaking or they don't have access to technology. We're really trying to make sure that all of our families have access to this process, and that's another reason for the long duration too. This is new to us, and we want to make sure everybody has that opportunity.
Can you touch on that a little bit more? Sorry.
That's
So
okay.
it's an English survey,
It's an
English language survey,
Yes,
and
currently, but it can be translated.
because I'm just wondering how will some of those families that are not English speaking get?
I'm working with Kim to get language translated so we can have that put on our website as well and pushed out to families. Kim Hayes is her name. She's our EL district support gal, and she says it doesn't take too long to translate. I may not have them ready to go tomorrow because I didn't want to translate documents that maybe might have to change based on tonight's conversation. But we're definitely focused on that. And then I've also worked with her to communicate if we need interpreters to come and partner with families for that. And they had a recent EL night, and I asked for them to give a little plug about
good.
this, knowing that this was coming up.
That's what I was gonna say, if you're pushing it out to them, so that's perfect.
Okay, so this might be what that family ID looks like. We receive the information. Here's the email address of the families that come in. Here's the guardian number, and then as they come in, we just start assigning them a number. Family 1 is family 1. Family 2 is 2. They might have multiple children, but they're getting a family ID. So we've received all of our interest surveys. It's March 18th. We've looked at the data, and we can take 450 kids, and we have 920. We're going to need to do a lottery. And so here's our lottery process kind of in a nutshell. We're going to draw by grade level, starting with kindergarten, moving through to 4th grade. I'm going to go through this fast because I have more detailed slides in a second. So a family number is drawn. Attached siblings also get selected and placed in appropriate grade levels. Once space is no longer available, students and siblings are waitlisted. If enrollment is declined, we pull from the wait list. And then beyond that, other waitlisted procedures, once we're kind of full in this initial step, are going to be articulated at a later point, just because we don't know what we're expecting in terms of wait list. And so if we take that slower now. So it's lottery day, and we are opening K4, and each grade has a bucket. So if you're looking at our model up here, that first bucket has a number 5 in it. So family number 5 has a kindergartner, but they also have a 3rd grader. And so it's kindergarten draw time. And if there's 200 names in there, it's 1 out of 200 for every family. So it's not like it's weighted if you have more than any sibling. However, number 5 gets drawn. So number 5 is now on the list. Number 5 has a sibling in 3rd grade, so the 3rd grade sibling gets put on the 3rd grade list. And so then this is what the summary screen would look like to families who are watching as the lottery draw takes place. I have to point. Sarah Banks is our new data analyst. She is absolutely fantastic. I cannot rave about her enough. So the number is called, we have student initials for privacy reasons attached to their family number, and the kids are placed in their family home. So family number 1 has a kindergartner, a 1st grader, and a 3rd grader. So kindergarten lottery is first. Number 1 is polled. Number 1 goes, but then the siblings automatically get to come as well. The next number is drawn. It's family number 2. They have a kindergartner, but they also have a 4th grader, so now that 4th grader is placed. So what that will look like is for round 1 in kindergarten, we're going to poll up to 60 kids. And through that process of 60 kids, you might get a distribution like this of siblings. Maybe of those 60 kindergartners, there's 5 1st grade siblings, maybe 11 2nd grade siblings, and 5 4th grade siblings. Then at 60, we're going to stop and we're going to move on to 1st grade. So now in 1st grade, instead of 60, we have 55 to fill. So we're going to poll our numbers randomly. 1st grade up to 60 again. Again with the 1st grade, if you have siblings, they're going to come with you. If you are a 1st grader and you have a kindergarten sibling, you're going to get put on the kindergarten list. You're not at max cap, you're at the initial round 1 cap. And then we would progress through that all the way through 4th grades. So by the end of the 1st round of lottery, it might look something like this. We've got 71 in kindergarten, 64 in 1st. We've filled up 4th grade to 60 kids. Now we're going to move on to round 2. Round 2 includes pulling all the remaining numbers. We're going to fill up that group until we're full and all the grades, and then we'll start waitlisting kids. So as we go through, we'll get to that max 80 wait list, and we've got a wait list. And this is what the wait list would look like on our summary screen for the lottery process. Again, it's got the family number, it's got the initials of the students, so a family who's viewing this from work or at home can kind of see where their numbers fall out.
I think I got waitlisted.
Art Jarvis.
But your family number 1.
Yeah.
You're number 1.
Stage 3 would be the confirmation. So lottery's done, day 1, technology is amazing. My tech people are saying we've got this. We can send email confirmation to the family that day. That is a Wednesday. By Friday, families will be expected to confirm whether they want to come to Pioneer or not. And then from there, those that decline, we will have an opportunity to go back and pull from the wait list. In talking with Satori, when they did this the very first time, I think they were able to enroll 600 students and they had somewhere around 1,100 interested. They said after the whole process was done, they didn't have much of a wait list because families were like, well, I'll just put it in, we'll see. Things changed, people determined that that's not something that they want to do anymore, or their very best friend didn't get in, so no longer is that going to work for us. And so we're hopeful that we're going to kind of go along this path. I think it's important, something I didn't say before. Again, after that March 18th deadline, if we get the data back of those interested and demographically it's not representative of what we were hoping, that again, it allows us time to pause. It allows us time to reflect. Do we need to reevaluate our lottery process to ensure that we're attending to the goals that we set out of creating a school community, of alleviating overcrowding, creating a fair and equitable process for all of our kids, and then keeping siblings together the best that we can. And then this is just a copy of what that summary page looks like. So it tracks the numbers that are drawn, where the kids are placed within the grades. This is an accumulation of the grade levels, the caps, how many students have been drawn, how many have been waitlisted, how many spots are remaining. This is keeping a summary of where the kid's coming from, so we can try to track that equitable poll from each of our school areas, and then a running wait list of the kiddos. Obviously, if we've only pulled like 8 numbers, we wouldn't actually have kids on the wait list, but it's just a show for modeling. So that's a lot of information. Like I said, it's a process. It's also something that I've been living in since September. So please ask questions. Let's process through this.
I have a couple.
Yeah.
And I just thought of this now, looking at the residential areas. Let's say it doesn't shake out really equitably. What if there's just a ton that come from one school? But they make it through that lottery? How are we going to address that?
Well, I would like to think that before we got to the lottery, we would have had that conversation. So after all the interest surveys are in, I will be able to look at the data and I'll be able to pull reports in terms of who's coming from where. And if we see that 400 kids are coming from one school, it's a phone call to John, it's a phone call to Art, it's a phone call to Dan, and we're going to say, we got to talk a little bit more about this. Our initial plan isn't going to work, or maybe it will, but I think it's a conversation that we're going to have. And then my hope would be then to be able to articulate that to all of you before we go live with the lottery on the 1st, and the families to clarify anything that we need to clarify at that point. And I don't know, Dr. Jarvis, do you want to add anything to that?
No, other than we recognize the complexity of the geography and evergreen versus discovery and how that's going to play out. So being the first time we've ever done it here, we really don't know. I know that, again, in Sartori and Renton, they had 525 slots, they had 1,700 that were interested, so they definitely had to work their way through the lottery. We're predicting that, given a proximity of Discovery and the size of Discovery at 653, it's clearly different than Evergreen, with further away and with several hundred fewer students. So we're trying to figure out first that sort of that space that we can look at it and say, what's our situation, and what are we going to need to do in order to make sure the equitable part. But we decided that was better than trying to promise an absolute set that then look at the number and say, oh, good Lord, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
We need to make an adjustment to it.
I'll elaborate on that a little bit. And I know you guys, it's a lot of what ifs, but I'm going to throw some what ifs out there.
Okay.
What if, luck or unluck of the draw, all of the kids come from the KP and there's no Gig Harbor, or vice versa?
We have these caps in here, I think, for that what-if situation. So when we looked at pulling proportionately from the district, there's about 4,000 elementary students. And so we looked at each of the populations of the elementary to determine what population does that represent of the total elementary population. Evergreen, for example, represents about 6% of the total population of Peninsula School District. So 6% of Pioneer represents about 26 students. So if we were thinking about Evergreen being 6% of our total elementary population, they should be about 6% of Pioneer's population. Now, with that said, what if we don't get, or what if in this case we do get all of our kiddos from the Key Peninsula? Then I think we have to have that conversation, because we're a magnet school, so we're not forcing people unless it is decided upon by the board. Then we have to look at, do we reboundary, or how do we go about forcing families?
Well, I guess I go back to the original reason why we have a magnet school, other than it being incredibly awesome and I want to go back to school, is that we are relieving overcrowding, and all of our schools are overcrowded. Yes. Elementary schools are overcrowded. So we're going to relieve overcrowding somewhere. Yes. But some are more overcrowded than others. And my fear is we're going to go through this process and we didn't take the kids that we needed to out of Discovery or Purdy, or the schools that are the most crowded, 14 portables at Purdy. And we still need 11 at Purdy. We don't want that to happen. So again, I know it's a very complex process, and I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I know you're ready for the red flags, and so that's good. I'm just a little bit anxious about fulfilling our initial promise with why we are doing the magnet school.
And I hear you, and I know that the community feels the same, and I feel the same too. And so it's, how do you, if we wait Artendale or Harbor Heights or Purdy greater, then are we at a disadvantage for the students on the KP that then have less opportunity to come because they don't have one of the bigger schools. I don't have the answers to any of that. I am hopeful that, and I think the thing that we have to consider as well, we are opening with 400 to 450 kids. The reality of that is, at our largest school, which is Discovery, we're slotting about 69 students. In a scope of 650 students, 69 students, given that they're dispersed K-4, it's not likely to be a whole class, or more than one whole classroom space. So I think that's just unfortunately the reality of it all, unless we were to say, we're only pulling from these schools. And then we would probably get numbers that would reduce classes. But 69 students, K-4 at one school, one classroom probably.
And just, if that weren't complicated enough, we also have a new Artendale emerging and a new Evergreen emerging. So what is the factor if I'm going to get a new Artendale as a parent or a child? Will that affect whether or not I want to leave Artendale and join in it? So there's another factor. To some extent, if your favorite class in college or wherever was statistics, the statistics would suggest that given the numbers we're looking at, it actually will work out. None of us will be pure in terms of believing the statistics until we see it and whether or not we need to take action. But with those numbers, again, I'm going to refer to Sartori because Dr. Harvey was here and we were trying to pick her brain. And in essence, she said by the time they were done, it worked out across the district and they didn't have to do any engineering in order to make that work. We don't know. We don't know. Our community hasn't been through it, and we have different geography, and we have some different factors of New Artendale and Evergreen, so it's guaranteed to make us, Stephanie and I were talking about, do we just talk to each other at 3:30 in the morning when we're laying there awake and wondering?
We should probably just start picking up the phone.
Or do we?
I see a big no over there.
Can we not
Good for you, Sandy. Phone. You have to plug your phone in the kitchen. Sorry.
So we're really trying to make sure we're very thoughtful about the process and give ourselves just enough space that if we needed to make adjustments and work back through you, here's what we're looking at, that we can do that and make it come out.
With everything, looking at how you've thought through everything else, I'm sure this will be well thought, it already is well thought out, but all the other red flags will be brought up. Can I circle back to one thing you said earlier, that you don't necessarily think maybe a class would be reduced at a school for a certain grade? If that's the case, then we're not pulling the teachers over. And because theoretically, we're moving 500 kids here, which the teachers would come with them, but if we're not reducing classes, we have to hire a whole new staff, which is.
Yeah, there's some,
Carol, do you have
some
thoughts?
angst in that on me too.
We have conversations that we're having.
Carol's been fantastic.
Okay.
So, but if you think about 69 students, and let's say Discovery's full, they're full in every aspect of full.
Yeah.
4 of their teachers are with me.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, and I'm grateful we can provide that for them. But if you think about their classrooms being at max capacity, which I think at 3rd grade is 27, 25, something like that. If you pull, and let's say there's 5 classrooms of 25, so it's 125 kids. If you pull 20 kids out of that, that's 5, you might reduce 1 class size. But that's not necessarily going to be the case across the board. If you pull 2 kids from this grade and 3 kids from that grade, it will reduce numbers of kids within a facility most certainly, but not necessarily reduce grade size.
So if you still need 5, what was your example, first, whatever grade it was,
yeah.
and we need a teacher over at Pioneer, or 2 teachers, where did those teachers come from?
Well, that's my next slide. It's talking about
Okay.
staffing and where we're at.
And
No, that's okay.
I would just add a comment that's the cleanest, most efficient way for the school district would be to dictate to the parents these are the kids who will go here and these are the kids who will go there, and you don't have any choice, because it works for us. And I'm overemphasizing that, but we are, as you hear, voice and choice and a magnet school. We're taking a risk that says that, especially in the opening, that these kids, well, if 100 students came out of school A, what are the odds that they come out in neat packages of one classroom each? Probably not. But again, statistically and taking the numbers, by and large, we'll be able to make adjustments, and it may not be a perfect match, but it can be made. If we're looking at 400 to 450 students, we will have space, and we'll have to work that out probably over 2 years. It won't be a perfect match. One of the problems we obviously have is overcrowding. So the tendency, or I guess the advantage would be if we just told everybody, it'd be a whole lot easier for us because we need those classrooms. But we are staying with the idea that we want parents and kids here by choice, and that will put us in a position of having to work through. Right now, and if I can pick on Katya for a minute, back of the room, Katya doesn't know for sure how many kindergartners are going to show up and how many classrooms she's going to need and what happens if she has that odd number that's not quite enough for 4 and not, anyway, if they just don't match up, we have to solve that problem each year and work our way through that. In a way, this is another version of that, except it's the whole school at once, enough to make us take a deep breath and try to calm down. But the reality is, we also agreed, we won't necessarily fill, as you just saw the model, we may only have 63 here, or we may have 82, or whatever works out. So we can make that work and make some adjustments. And we've talked about what's the minimum number we can open with, and what's the maximum number, and what happens with the various situations. So I guess I'm overstating it, but we gave up the efficiency of just dictating to the world that we really need. We need to decide for everybody. I don't care where you live, we're going to decide. And we went to this, and it's messy. It's messier than anything else. I guess back to when you as a board, at least 3 of you, made that decision, it was sort of with that recognition that we were doing something that we believed was appropriate to have a magnet school, and what went with it. So stay tuned, and if you said, no, we're so uncomfortable with this, we're going to reverse tomorrow and do it all by boundary, Stephanie and I will go back. Don't worry about the lottery. There'll be some other voices we have to worry about. But I think it's one that we can deliver it for you. We just don't know how neat some of the edges will be.
Yes, I do have a question. I'm super excited about this, by the
Thanks,
way. I'd
Lori.
like to start with that. But I do need one piece explained to me yet again. More than one person has tried. And sadly, it's because I did love my stats and probability class in college. And because of that, I'm struggling to understand how it's equitable I have 3 kids, for me to get 3 raffle tickets to someone else's 1. I feel personally like if my youngest does not get drawn for kindergarten, but then his older sister does, so then he gets in, I feel not right about that. That feels awkward to me if someone else in kindergarten only has a kindergartner and they don't get drawn. And I totally get it's an impossible thing to really work out perfectly. But it seems, in my probability sort of stats mind, like each family should get 1 entry, and that entry either goes with the youngest child or I also understand the complexity with kindergarten could be full if you give it to the youngest child. There's different probability of getting drawn in each grade level based on who, but do you see my point? I mean, I'm sure this has all been discussed. That would just be my personal, I'm having a struggle. I just wanted to voice that with getting on board, giving a family, which would have been me, with 3 kids, 3 tries to get all 3 in to someone else's 1 try doesn't feel equitable to me. So I don't.
I'll start and then Dr. Jarvis can chime in. I would say most definitely I hear you and I feel you because I'm a linear sequential person and I like clean margins. So this has grown me substantially. I've been kept awake and it's hard. I think at some point it would have to come down to what is the priority. Is it equitable or is it hearing the community when they say siblings are important? And I am proposing that we do this model, which is better than I have 5 kids, so I get 5 marbles all at once. It's by grade level. So theoretically, by 2nd grade, if there's 40 slots left, everybody that's there has 1 in 200. If there's 200 kids for 40 slots, everybody has a 1 in 200 chance of getting pulled for those 40 slots. Now I hear that and I'm not a probability and statistics person, so don't quote me on this. When it's over multiple, yes, they're getting multiple shots at that. And I hear that as being unequitable too. So my thought would be it has to be one or the other. And I don't know if Dr. Jarvis in his smart math mind has a different idea.
Well, I definitely think, to be clear, that siblings should be allowed to go together if that's what's best for that family. Not everyone may even choose that. But so I totally am about that, but it seems to me that it would make more sense just for the family to get 1 number, but that only has the opportunity to be drawn at one point. So I don't know.
Just let me take a stab at it. And there is a value that's been inserted there, and I'll just state it, and that if we're going to draw 400 children, and we're going to put 400 children in the school, we can do that 1 by 1. And rely on eventually that you'll get maybe 2 out of 3 of your 3 children in, or 1 out of 3, whatever that may be. But we could fill that very definitely by every child gets 1, and when we're at 400, we're done. And whatever your odds were, that was the way it went. But we looked at that one and said, in terms of the family and the family unit in a magnet school where they're not in the neighborhood anymore. So they're not in their neighborhood group, they're not in their family group. Now you've got a collection of one child draws, that we felt it was much more of a statement of what we believed in terms of the family, to say that when you're drawn as a family unit, the older brother and sister, because no matter what, we're going to talk about transportation in a minute, but some percentage, and I'm going to say roughly a very high percentage, of parents are going to come and drop their children off at this magnet school. They're going to make it work. So if they're not as a family unit, that's really messed up for the family to do that versus taking the whole family in. There will also be the family that says Pioneer is right for child number 2 and not child number 3. We're going to make choices and we're not going to dictate to them that has to be. But it really did put right up front that value. We started with the most efficient and effective and the most equitable was everybody was 1. We'd draw 400 names, and when it was all done, it was somebody else's problem who were the siblings. But we pulled back from that when we took a look at that and said the effect on the family is much harder. We felt it actually eliminated families from being eligible to, many would not participate, or if they got 1 drawn but not 2, they wouldn't even participate. So it became either it's a positive or a negative, but there's kind of no neutral point in between. And we made the recommendation then and the choice to go with that. And I do recognize what you're saying, because it has changed that, but it also says because we believed it was the right thing to do and not end up with families split between multiple schools any more than we had to. So
Yeah, I think Lori's articulating that she doesn't want to pull the families apart, and you've probably thought of this, but what if my kindergartner didn't get chosen. And so my fourth grader is pulled out of round one. And so when you get up to the fourth grade round one, my fourth grader is no longer in there, but can be put back into a later round. So then I still have 1-to-1, right? So it was my kindergartner that didn't get in. And you get up to the fourth grade round one, and that my family doesn't have a second chance to get in there. Does that work?
How about if we did it another way? How about if we had the families that only had one kid applying in a different bowl, and if you pulled Lori's family and you got 3 kids in there, then you pull 3 kids out of the single bowl, because those families only get 1 shot, where she's getting 3 shots. So that balances out your statistical options or the chances.
So you
I
have
think
a single bowl and a multifamily bowl?
Yeah.
I think to me, I'm just, and I don't know why I cannot get this piece. I'm so sorry, I'm really trying. I think it seems like there should be, Glover is say we're number 5, so there's just a straight draw. And maybe I'm missing the piece of why kindergarten has to go first, maybe that's why.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
why don't we just draw, and you draw my family and we get those 3 spots, and we draw your family and you get this 1 spot, and still one class is gonna fill before another.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I don't
then
think you're missing the
you
point.
draw me or you don't
They
draw me,
hear.
and all 3 of my kids go or they don't go.
Yeah.
No?
So I hear your recommendation is
I
to
don't know.
do family numbers, whether you have 1 child or 7, and do 1 big poll. We're not polling by grade level, we're just polling. And we're filling to those max lines, and then beyond that part, everyone's waitlisted. I think our rationale for doing it this way is there was a little bit more control in terms of those, as we're getting to that capacity mark in terms of kiddos and looking at who are siblings and who are not. This way, it could be that it would be more equitable. And siblings may or may not get in. Your way could work too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted
Okay,
to,
I think,
I
yeah.
just wanted to
But-
make
Yeah.
that known.
It's a highly, we've said it already, highly complex process. I know you're thinking through it all. There is a concern with a little bit of the equity of that. As you move forward, I think just keep that in mind, if there's a better way to look at that. But at the end of the day, if you are valuing the family unit and making that work, I think the board understands that. I believe, is what I heard.
No, for sure. I mean, you
everyone
guys
said.
are the professionals that are spending all your waking hours doing.
Professionals
research on
and
it.
statistics
I
are two
just
very different
wanted
things.
to say- I just wanted it to be known that I am struggling with that piece, so.
This whole process
it's
has been a
done.
challenge, and I hear you say that. I would like to propose that we can launch the interest survey tomorrow and get people excited. I have 3 community events during the next month. I would like to then also propose that you trust that we as a team are going to look at that data. And should we need to make adjustments to our proposed lottery process, we most certainly will do that, and make sure that you are all involved in that conversation as well.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds great, thank you.
All right, so moving on to staffing, I have this amazing core team of, hi, how you guys doing? Some of them have never been to a board meeting before.
Never come back.
Oh, they're gonna be coming every time. So, I feel very grateful that I've been able to work alongside Carol and just work through this muddled mess together. Again, just like the lottery process, this is something new, this is something we haven't done before. So we are actually in the process of our staffing timeline. My hope would be that we'd be able to bring our certificated staff on board before spring break. So ideally, as long as I'm sticking to my timeline, we're spring break for both students and staff. That is going to be hugely important and essential to making sure that the rest of the district knows who's coming and where and what kind of staffing arrangements that they have. Additionally, then there's support that we need in our buildings that we need to look at staffing for too. I'm making a pitch that we have a dean and an instructional coach, and I don't need that decision tonight, as I know that that is a bigger district conversation, but I think we used to have instructional coaches in this district, and they're an invaluable asset to helping our professionals grow. in terms of the art of teaching and what they do. We're also going to need a secretary in our office. We have some sped staffing, but we'll need, John has the process of itinerants for occupational therapy and speech and all that. And then staffing actually typically comes about June through the summer, and we would follow the district process for that. So I think it's just important to know what timeline is coming up. But it's pretty exciting to me, for me to think that when I get back from spring break, ideally, I'll know who my students are and who my staff are, and we can really start to build that community. So if we're thinking about certificated in terms of that big process, per contract, we have our collective bargaining unit, we have a transfer process. And what this allows our staff to do is say, hey, I'm kind of interested in teaching something else somewhere else. And so instead of going through the long, tedious process of actually applying and doing this huge formal interview, they can say, I'm interested in transferring. It doesn't mean that they necessarily will get to transfer, but they get to say that they're interested in transferring. And so that process was open January 29th, and it closed yesterday, so it was open for 2 weeks. And part of our connection with Carol was kind of recognizing pioneers slightly different. We are trying new things. And so unlike some of our schools where that transfer is a little bit more informal, we are able to add a little bit more of a formal element to that. And so everyone who indicated on the transfer survey that they are interested in transferring to Pioneer received an email today saying, you indicated you're interested in transferring to Pioneer. There are a couple extra steps. First off, this is what you need to know. This is our opening model. Here's a statement from these fabulous folks in terms of what they want their colleagues to know about what we're trying to accomplish. And then a task, and it could be a letter, just kind of who are you and why are you excited about this journey, and that gives us a little bit of extra element to understand who the teachers are that are interested in coming to us. Beyond that, Carol and I need to talk. What's hard is, again, there's so many unknowns. My linear personality is growing a lot. If it's 15 staff members, it's really easy to sit down and have a conversation with 15 staff members and talk and get to know them and how are they a fit with this team. If it's 100, we don't have the time to sit down individually with all 100. So how would we have to modify that process? So we're working with HR and Carol to determine, now that we know that survey is done, that number is lingering out there. We don't know that number yet, but we will know that number, and after break we'll sit down with Carol and we'll say, okay, we know that this number of staff is interested. We don't yet know how many are actually going to submit that letter or document to show, why they're excited about Pioneer. But given this number that is interested, how should we proceed with determining the selection of those staff? We do have about 19, I think, if I counted accurately, positions to fill. So that is a lot. That's very abnormal. Usually a school will have 1 or 2, but because we are creating something new. So we haven't talked about what percentage is going to be in district. We are going to, as I shared here in our timeline process, we are going to have an external posting in a couple weeks open for pool positions. Should we not be able to fill all 19 positions from in district due to various reasons, the interest isn't there, or we don't, deem all of the people who applied are best fits in partnership with PEA. So it's not that necessarily that pool will be used, but it will be kind of there. And it's typically about the time we start to launch just open pool positions for our elementary schools anyway. So it's kind of aligned with the process for all of our schools. There we go. That is hiring for certificated staff. Questions?
I just have one.
Yes.
I hate to throw up.
No.
This is another giant what if, but if you're looking at staffing, and we're talking about sped teachers and counselors, and we're dealing with a lottery, how are we going to balance to make sure that we have the appropriate staff for the diverse kids that may or may not be coming?
We will adjust. So, counselors are based on FTE, and so it's usually 1 FTE per 400 or 450 kids, and so that's where we're at now. SPED, it all depends again on numbers. So those numbers don't necessarily have to be determined right now. A caseload for special education teacher, I think, is 30 students. So if for some reason we get kiddos in and we have 80 students on IEPs, well then of course I'm going to be looking at John, and we're going to be talking about what that staffing looks like in terms of going back and looking at those that were interested in transfers. We couldn't consider you at the time because at the time we didn't know that we had more SPED openings, but now that we do, looking at those that might have been interested at that time. Questions?
Don't have anything on that? That seems like a standard process.
let's say, again, I'm into exaggerations
I
today,
love
sorry.
it. Yep. No, you're good. This is
All
your
your
job.
teachers
Deb.
come from one school,
They won't.
okay? Then I won't even ask the question. But if they
They
did,
could, but they
and
won't.
then you have poor principal, you have a mass exodus
Yeah.
of all their teachers, and then you have to rebuild that culture and all of that. I am super excited that there's a lot of collaboration with the PEA, which it sounds like it's happening, so thank you for that. I will then just leave it at that.
I think Carol and I are both on the same page that is not something that we want to happen to the kids, to the communities, to the schools, to the principals. That's not.
Right.
But I mean,
And then if you, let's say, not the exaggeration of draining one school. Let's say several teachers went out of one school, but not a lot of kids left that school. Will we have to move teachers from Artendale over to Harbor Heights to adjust that? So they didn't choose to go to the magnet school, the teacher, but will there be some movement of teachers to schools?
potentially. I mean, go ahead. Carol.
Provisions of our collective bargaining agreement that provide for staff who are either displaced because the student enrollment naturally doesn't show
Yep.
up.
Yep.
So we would
So
follow
it'd be the
that
same.
first to find them placement, and then we have the district transfer pool that then would be able to do some additional shuffling, and then the hiring process. So it's pretty complicated. There's a few different layers, which is why we're talking about it.
Thank you for that collaboration, thank you. Okay.
Okay. So transportation, this will be a quick one. I would love to be able to come to you tonight and propose to you, this is our transportation plan. I am very grateful that the district has committed to providing transportation for our students. That's a huge equity piece for me. However, until we know where our students are coming, it's very difficult to articulate what are those stops, what are those routes, what are they going to be. And I think it's important for me, I'm very clear and I like to be transparent. Pending students, pending where they come, pending stops and pending routes, that could also indicate changes in start and end time for Pioneer. So there's lots of decisions to be made in that realm, but we're just not ready to say what those are yet because we don't know where our kiddos are coming from.
Thank you for giving yourself a break and not thinking all three
Yeah.
We tried, but then we were like, nope, we can't do it.
Move on.
Scenario F.
Yep.
And then finally, again, I just really want to make sure that I'm out there and answering questions and being available for people. So I've set up 3 informal questions and answers, 1 during the day, 2 in the evening, to just for families, once they get this communication and maybe they haven't been to any of our events yet, that they have wonderings, they can come and they can get information. It won't be a formal presentation, but it'll just be me hanging out, answering any questions they have, helping them with the interest process survey if they have them, and then also opening up Pioneer for a couple different times for families to come to us and get those questions answered as well. And then Amy left, but I'm working closely with Amy and her department in terms of, how do we do blasts and make sure that all this information is getting out there on all the different websites, shared with my principal colleagues, on our social media accounts so that families are aware of what's going on and the timeline associated with that. Okay. And mascot. I'm super excited. So, it's part of like a school's identity. And honestly, like I have more angst about trying to decide a mascot than a school name. Probably because you all decided the school name. So I think that's why. But I'm excited because Pioneer is a community school. This is the first thing that we've done as a community. And so I want all community input. So I'm hoping here in a couple weeks that we can put out a survey and just hear from people what they want. My own child has recommended things that I maybe shouldn't share. She likes the woodpeckers, but she has shortened it to just be the Pioneer Peckers. And I said, that's probably not an appropriate school name. And then they thought that Pioneer Pine Cones would be appropriate. And I said, again, I'm just not sure that this is what we're going for. So I could really use some inspiration from the community in coming up with a name or a mascot for Pioneer. So I'm hoping to have that survey out there and just hear from people who have kids in our schools and people who are retired. Like, this is a fun opportunity for us to brand our school. school. And then once that survey closes, the core team will kind of take a look at those recommendations, narrow it down to 2. And then once we have our staff and our students on board, they'll get to vote on those 2 and kind of help with the design process. And so as we launch into spring and summer, we can start to, really identify that brand. We can start to see those colors take shape in our newly designed building and do spirit wear and all those things as we launch the year. Any reservations about the timeline?
No.
Or
Were
the
the colors picked?
None. Colors are not yet picked. That will be a part of the
Okay.
mascot process.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks. And here we go. So this isn't the last time you get to see us. There will be more. And so I'll have Jen share a little bit about what we will hopefully be able to come to you with next time.
So we've been working on putting together a master schedule, and again, kind of trying to think outside the box and outside the boundaries with this whole new opportunity. And so we have been looking at pie in the sky, and then just kind of trying to trickle it down. Of if we could think of those kids who are on the margins, how could we design a school day that works for them? And then also looking at specialists in creative ways to try and see, so with specialists, how can we make that work so kids are getting that exposure to music, getting their mandatory PE minutes, but also having some voice and choice in some like interests too. How can we have some specialists that could help them kind of take some ownership on that? And scope and sequence. We've been, just our last time that we met, trying to hash out with our standards, what are those units that we want to cover? How can we try and align those K-5 so that we could be having those conversations with kindergartners and 4th graders working in collaboration, or 2nd graders and 5th graders, so that we're all kind of learning about the same things but just at different levels with where we're at. Looking really at how do we teach them to read with those foundational skills? How do we teach them to add and subtract and hit all of those standards that are embedded in each grade level, but also really be able to have them showcase what they're learning in non-traditional ways, creating podcasts, creating videos, taking works of art and demonstrating their learning from that, and giving them choice with what they're able to use as their medium for expressing what they've been learning. And a lot of what we've been talking about around that is creating rubrics that aren't just focused on everybody having that same product, but you could show me 3 things that you've learned about creating clean waterways from a piece of art, but also from a podcast or a video or a standardized test. So again, learning about our students and giving them those preferences that work best for them to be able to demonstrate what they've been learning. And that is a big piece of our assessment, again, still following our district assessment calendar and assessments that are provided through the district, but looking at the day-to-day with our students and being able to incorporate in more of their interests, more of their style of learning in order to motivate them to produce their best work and to be passionate about what we're teaching them. And then professional learning and district support. Again, Stephanie's talked at length of having an instructional coach and those support people such as our specialist time and being willing to think outside the box with us, especially when we think about our specialists and extras like instructional coaches, because that's kind of pivotal to our model and again, giving kids that ability to choose. And to really be able to motivate their learning and motivate them to do more because they're highly engaged in what they're creating and what they're learning about. And then resources, we've kind of gone through that list too. But again, just we're super grateful for that opportunity to be able to be given that time to dream pie in the sky. And then really, again, more time to be able to work it out and say, okay, so how can we logistically do this, and what are some extras that we can wish for in order to best serve those kids in a magnet school model to make the kids as passionate about science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics as we are. So.
I would just add that professional learning and district support too is feedback I've received from talking with colleagues that have opened brand new schools is, you can have the best laid plans, but day one, nobody knows anything. Nobody knows who Johnny Smith is down the hall. Nobody knows where room 204 are. So, working with PEA, working with the district in terms of how do we get some extra time at the beginning of the year, we have to orient ourselves to each other. We have to build that community. We have to have that trust. We have to know names and faces of staff. And, we have to orient ourselves to the building and the facility and how are kids going to move about. When you onboard 2, 3, 4 staff members every year, there's people that already know, so they can kind of just follow. Here, it's all going to be brand new, and so that in addition to the professional learning and like how we grow as professionals, we are going to need additional time for that work too.
Stephanie, one thing I forgot to ask earlier, and I know in your mission, you want to encourage that multi-age learning.
Yes.
Thus you have multi-aged grades.
Yes.
Grade level,
Multi-aged,
classrooms.
yeah.
So is that the intent to move forward, that you'll group those, cluster those one and first and second,
Yes.
third and fourth?
K1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, all right. I don't have a concern with it. I just wondered if that was intentional and that was I know we have clustered grades in our district already, so that works out well. All right. Any other questions? Ashley has a question.
Yay, Ashley!
I kind of have a question back to like the lottery thing. Are kids only going to be able to enter at the beginning of the school year? Like, let's say somewhere in the school year, kids like switch districts or something. Does that open a spot for another student, or can they only become a student at the beginning of the school year?
You are awesome. I have thought about that. We're still kind of working out some of those details. We have a couple different processes that we've considered. In our public schools, as kiddos move into neighborhoods, they just come, right? They come and they go and they come and they go and they come and they go. We do have a slightly different model, so we're toying with, do we have strategic times of the year in which, okay, this first trimester, 8 students moved out, and now we're going to go to our wait list and pull kids in at this trimester. Do we do it monthly? We're still working out those details, but it is important to me. I don't think that a family who moves in at late August should be penalized forever, not ever having that chance to get into Pioneer because they weren't here when we first opened. So that's certainly something that we're considering as we look at, the wait list and lottery for years beyond this initial start. Great question.
Well, Stephanie and team, a lot of information, a lot more work that was put into it that we didn't even see. Thank you for entertaining all of our questions and concerns. And I know that it will evolve over time, and it'll all work out. I trust you.
And if I could just make a comment to the board, I just very much appreciate my time with you all. I think that your job is to ask the questions. Your job is to seek the clarity and the communication. I know that I didn't necessarily communicate that as clearly as I would hope because it's so messy. But I hear you, and I appreciate the voices that you're sharing today, and I think we're all on the same page in wanting this to be the very best that we can for PSD.
And if David was here, he would reiterate. We'd love to see music.
A band in elementary school. He would say
so
that.
I will say that again for
Thank
David.
you, Deb, for saying that.
Thank you guys all for
Thank
pulling
you.
double duty, really. You've done a fantastic job. So I
They're
hope that
amazing.
you are still enthusiastic and eager.
32 weeks.
32 weeks.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you.
I do have a comment.
Oh.
An elementary school is a community, and like with Evergreen down there, that's a community. I don't really anticipate a lot of requests from Evergreen. I mentioned it earlier, I was the vice chair of the Boys and Girls Club when it first opened. I quickly realized that the geographic problems of trying to draw kids from the Key Peninsula was tough. Go forth and conquer. But that's one of the reasons I look forward to other schools being theme schools also. The peninsula, two very geographically isolated areas, are going to be tough to accommodate transportation to something like this. And so I'm behind you guys to go all the way, but I'm also looking at other answers to solving that equity issue.
A challenge for the rest of the district.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, very much. Okay. Coffee? Everyone okay? We will move forward. If Lori, unless you guys want to take a quick break?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I would now like to discuss the superintendent search. I have a few opening statements, and I'm glad I wrote them down now after that, because my mind, I will be honest, is a little boggled and overwhelmed. So if you would allow me, I would like to open the discussion with a statement. We have been blessed with having one of the most experienced and knowledgeable superintendents in the state for the past 18 months. Thank you. Yes. Not old, experienced, knowledgeable. During this time, Dr. Jarvis has been instrumental in passing two critical funding measures for the district, and a $198 million capital projects bond to alleviate overcrowding at the district's elementary schools, and an $80 million educational programs and operations replacement levy to fund ongoing operations of the district. And as Dr. Jarvis pointed out earlier, is passing at an overwhelming 61.89% at this moment. Yay, again. For this, Dr. Jarvis, we thank you. Your leadership and your leadership in general. We are forever grateful for the time you have been with the Peninsula School District. Thank you on behalf of the board and me personally. Well, Dr. Jarvis is not in a position to sign a multiple-year contract with our district. He has stated, jokingly, but with all honesty, and I've confirmed with Mrs. Jarvis, that he will continue on as superintendent for the Peninsula School District as long as we want or need him. As a side note on that, with that offer, that is why the board actually took the title of interim out of his title in his last contract, and that's why he is our superintendent. Since Dr. Jarvis is unable to sign a multiple-year contract, this puts our board in a position of considering a contract for Dr. Jarvis on an annual basis. At this time, I would ask the board to open up discussion on Dr. Jarvis's contract and thoughts on an upcoming long-term superintendent search. So we're going to talk about you for a little bit. Is that all right?
I will sit back and enjoy.
And I guess before we start the well, we'll go into. So I will open it up for discussion on thoughts about how we move forward with our superintendent search and timing and whatnot. And I do have comments from David that I will share along the way. Okay. Anyone?
Well, I'll start. I had the opportunity to experience some of Tacoma schools and what Art did over there. My stepson came out of Geiger, which was Montessori, Tacoma Public School. And Art doesn't remember it, but I was in a citizens advisory panel many, many years ago and worked with him on that also when I got introduced to the stepson and my now wife. And I envision the peninsula being something like that, the themed schools. I think we need to figure out our strategic plan before we go out and hire somebody, because we don't know what we want right now until we form our plan. Okay. And so Art is taking us in a direction that I think we want to go. Otherwise, we better say something now.
Get off the train.
And so I definitely see us continuing for another year, if Art is so inclined to help us get through. He's also very experienced with construction processes, has that knowledge. I would hate to see somebody else stepping in right now, the situation we're in. It would, I'm not sure how many applicants we would get right now with everything that's going on, all the construction and stuff. So I think we need to get past this and give us a better opportunity to figure out our plan.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just gonna echo on the strategic plan. This is something that we have talked about for a while, so I think it's kind of the chicken or the egg scenario. Do we select a new superintendent who can commit, sign a long-term contract, and then walk us through that plan process? Or do we, as a board, really sit down and decide that vision for ourselves and spend an appropriate amount of time in going through that very lengthy process of finding that next superintendent who meets that vision? So I think that, like we just saw from Pioneer, it's a mission-driven organization. I think that we should be the same, so that everything we do falls under one giant, scope that addresses achievement, safety, culture, and facilities. And so when we pick that person, we will already have that mission and vision set. And with all that we have going on right now, I don't think there's anyone better to lead us through both that planning phase and getting us to this critical phase of 4 new schools in 2 years on time and on budget than Dr. Jarvis.
Lori, any other thoughts?
Just really echo both of what they both already said, but I have done a fair amount of, I should say, had a fair amount of conversations about this topic going back to WASDA, and just anytime I would encounter someone from another district or who had done a superintendent search. I will say I did not ever encounter one person who didn't know Art Jarvis or hadn't worked with him or spoken highly of him, so that was also fun. But therein is also a point. I mean, we could, I'm sure we'd love to have you stay forever, but that is probably not something that Sandy would choose. Anyhow.
Depends on the day.
Yeah, right. But in all those conversations, so I did get different input from different people, and so I do think that in the situation we're in, like you said, I don't know how many applicants we'd get. We have so many things going on, and things are going well, as was just reinforced by the voters, to keep the continuity of Dr. Jarvis. It's intentional. It's not just kicking the can down the road. I think that is what I want to say to the public, that it's been something we've put a great deal of time and energy into thinking about what is best to, to have a strategic plan and to know where we want to go, and then to choose the best person to get us there, which is different than telling a candidate, this is exactly what you're going to do for us, and you're going to have to fit in, because that's not, we have no applicants in that case either.
Sure.
So, we need a general strategic plan, and then look for the best person to take us there. Also, I do think it's possible, it's not impossible to bring in a new superintendent to see out these construction projects. It could be done, but I feel like I've never worked with any leader who is a better decision maker than Dr. Jarvis. And so that alone, that quality, I think we would miss deeply in these next few years. If because you have the experience and the wisdom, and you're able to just say, here's what I think we should do, and, so.
And there is a timeline. Lori and I attended a training for superintendent search. So that's a lengthy process that's probably would have started prior to where we are right now. So in order to give that its due time,
Yeah.
I would like to be able to do that as well.
Okay. Well, 2 new board members coming on, and the board project started and put on a very Art Jarvis accelerated schedule going on. I have concerns about the timing of a superintendent search. I've been very encouraged with the conversations this board has had in terms of really wanting to drive where our district is going. And I think Art has led us in some very
encouraging conversations, and I'm excited for this board to work together to get that established and really give direction and vision for our entire district. So I'm excited to do that work now. I don't want to wait until we're able to hire someone, and even if they started July 1, they would be, here's 4 projects on a very aggressive schedule, figure out who our teachers are and what that looks like, and all this other stuff that goes along in a superintendent's world that I probably don't even know. It would be a while before we had that conversation with that superintendent. So the idea, I'm glad you guys are all looking at wanting to move forward with that strategy and that whatever it's called now. And I think we actually have a meeting in February next month to start even more talking about that. So I think that's important. And then I definitely echo I guess the fact that the complexities of building 4 schools at once cannot be overstated. It's aggressive, and especially on the schedule you have us on. Like you said, I think another superintendent could come in, but we need to protect that $198 million investment that our district and our community put into our schools. We want to deliver these schools on time and on budget. We need a decision maker. I've talked to the capital facilities team. They need that decision maker. And I think Art definitely is that decision maker that can keep us on target and are on task and on budget. So I too feel that way. David, it looks like I'm reading through his notes, he's echoing that as well. He has accomplished everything he's accomplished since he's been hired. His combined extensive background in capital projects management and construction. It's my strongest desire to see his contract extended. He does point out, and I think as we develop the strategic plan, making sure you have a pulse of our entire community, our schools. I know you're being really involved with the principals right now, but in getting out to see teachers and whatnot too. We've had you on a road show for the last 18 months as well, so hopefully now that the road shows are done with the capital projects and the levy, that's a little bit something more, so as we develop it, we know who we're developing it for. I'm glad to see the board in the schools as well, and listening to teachers' stories, and it helps us drive that going forward. So, any other thoughts, comments on this in terms of Dr. Jarvis's contract?
When is it up? What's the timeline?
So his contract is done June 30th.
Okay.
So we would have a hire by July 1. Okay. Let's get that done. Let's get that done. Here's the other thing that I think is important.
2021.
We laugh at that, but really seriously think about it. We were getting the 4 projects underway. We had 2 new board members that are coming up to speed. We could have forced that process, and it just, I don't know that would have been the best way for us to look at all the great possible candidates and make the best long-term decision for our district. So,
With time to include all of the stakeholders.
Yeah. So we want to do that. We would look more at the fall. So unless I'm hearing something different from all of you, I think we're not voting on a contract tonight. We are going, I think the board is wanting and asking. Let me ask you first, is your offer still good? Are you still wanting to stick around?
Let me check. Yes.
Okay, so thank you. We will work out contract later, but unless anyone has any other comments, we will be offering you a contract to stay through June of 2021 as we open up 4 schools. No. So, any other comments, thoughts?
No, just if we are going to do the search next year, we need to be thinking about it. If that's the plan.
So I think you guys probably heard that in your training. So really, if we want to go out and get the best timing,
Right.
is to we've gone through our strategic plan, we have a good vision, we probably will get what we need as a leader out of that.
Yeah.
And then we start thinking about it in the fall, and we start thinking about bringing in someone to help us.
Right.
We start reaching out to stakeholders, and the most viable, the best candidates that are gonna be out there will be that end of the year, beginning of the 2021, and then we move forward with that. So you're right, we would wanna start that, not February 13th of next
Right,
year.
right. So I want to be picturing a calendar in my head.
Yes.
Because we need to finish up our strategic plan. So
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah.
that's a big-
So I guess I feel it's the best interest of our district that we, thankfully, will be able to extend you another contract for a year, and we are thrilled.
It'll be tough negotiations. No, if I may have a word,
Yes, please.
I'm honored. I know how passionate you are as a board and how committed you are, and the fact that you're offering me that, really your baby, the school district and what you're about is an honor. And I've been around long enough, clearly, that I watch districts who struggle with trying to find a match and trying to find the right situation, and so I take that as a personal honor. I also feel the commitment and been fortunate to have good health that allows me to do this. And as many jokes as we make about being retired, sometimes people don't get choices, and so I'm just grateful that I can do this. I think as far as a board and a community, one of the somewhat, I guess, things you get to experience is that you can send me home any day. You can say it's time and we go, but seriously, it really is one where we've got a lot of work to do, and we're engaged in heavy-duty work. I had Sharon and the staff, any of the staff could tell you that there was the world before February 11th on Election Day, and then there was the world that was going to roll out on starting February 12th because we were holding back some things. You heard part of that tonight. You realize what's in store for the near-term spring and how we make that work. But I think even beyond that is that's one example of changes that are taking place in the worlds that are being addressed in the school district, and it's certainly my pleasure to tackle that on your behalf and be part of a team. My partner out there has been willing to let me do this, so that means we still have pictures that are sitting in the hallway and not hung, and I try to get to it on weekends. So I just thank her for that willingness to let me have the joy of working in the school district, and I do consider it a joy, and working with the staff has been marvelous. So it's a long way of saying the simple thank you.
I think we'll give them a couple extra days off this month, too.
You're not sitting in negotiations.
No time.
Maybe next week.
Dr. Jarvis, thank you. Sandy, Ms. Jarvis, thank you. We get the pleasure of going to all these school board functions and people going, oh, you have Dr. Jarvis. So,
I will throw
yes,
David
we
under
do,
the bus
right?
real quick.
Do you not get that?
We do. We were at a meeting this week, and Dr. Jarvis, of course, knows everyone in the room, and he pointed out one gentleman, said, that was my band teacher. And David said, he's older than you? No, my hired band teacher.
Oh, very good. That's pretty funny. That's hilarious.
It didn't look that old.
Okay, well, with that, at 8:10, we adjourn the meeting. All right. Thank you.